Hi, Purple Ella here. Today I'm going to share 5 tips for a romantic relationship with an autistic person. I am just one autistic person in one romantic relationship with a neurotypical person, and the advice that I'm going to give you is based on my own personal experiences and will not apply to all autistic people. I have been married now for coming up to 18 years. It'll be 18 years in July, and I consider myself very lucky to have been able to have been in a stable relationship with my lovely husband, Mr. Purple, for so long. However, it has not been easy. It was particularly not easy before we found out that I was autistic, and a lot of the ways in which it has not been easy have been to do with communication. So I wanted to share my top 5 tips from my personal experience if you are either an autistic person in a relationship to share with your partner, or if you are a neurotypical person who is in a romantic relationship with an autistic person. So number 1, use clear language and other communication forms. So I know that in the past, a lot of the disagreements that Mr. Purple and I have had can really be put down to him saying something and me not hearing what he was saying and hearing something completely different, and vice versa, me saying something and him not hearing what I was saying. This can be because a lot of times people assume things. So, to give you an example, when I have a problem, I like to be able to talk about it with Mr. Purple. And Mr. Purple, as is often typical for some men, likes to solve that problem by finding solutions or trying to fix it. And it isn't necessarily going to say, oh, that sounds terrible, oh, that sounds hard. And recently, we had a situation where I'd got a problem and he was trying to problem solve it. And I said to him, I feel like you don't care because you don't listen and you're not hearing what I'm saying about how this is hard. You're just jumping in and taking over and trying to do it for me. And he said, the fact that I'm doing stuff and that I'm taking time to help you with this problem, does that not tell you that I care? And I was like, well, actually, no, it totally doesn't. I'm not reading that. I'm not reading social cues. I'm not reading what you're doing or what you're thinking. I'm not thinking about what you're thinking and what that means about how you feel about me. I'm really not. I need you to actually physically say the words, oh, I care about this situation. And then I will know that you will care. And ditto sort of facial expressions, body language. Quite a lot of times I would make assumptions that Mr. Purple was angry or upset or mad with me when he was really just having his resting face and not being smiley. Because I have only really learnt to read the really obvious social cues like happy or sad. Everything in between, I'm either going to go with happy or I'm going to go with sad. So if it's kind of fairly neutral, I'm going with sad or I'm going with angry. And in fact, Mr. Purple recently, in a little experiment, showed me 5 different variant facial expressions. I think I got one of them right, and all the rest I just assumed were angry. So that kind of shows how much difficulty I'm having reading those social cues, that body language, those facial expressions. So he's kind of merrily going along, assuming that I am reading that stuff, and so I am understanding him, and I just am not. So we have come to the conclusion that explicit language, or whatever communication form it is that you use with your partner, can be just clearer, and then he knows for sure, and I know for sure, that the message is being understood. Number 2, learn about autism. Find trusted and valuable resources on the topic of autism and find out as much as you can about it. You are in a relationship with someone who has different neurology to you, and so it would be a really helpful thing if you can find out as much as you can about what that neurology looks like and the types of traits that it can cause, so that you have a wide understanding of autism, so that you are coming from a place of understanding why your partner might behave the way they behave or react the way that they react sometimes. Number 3, find out about your partner's particular variety of autism. If I've said this once, I'll say it 1,000 times. All autistic people are different. We are not all the same. We do not all have all the same traits. We all have an individual profile of which traits of autism affect us. So sit down and have a conversation. Or if that's not easy, send some emails or whatever communication you guys find easiest to use. Ask your partner how their autism impacts on them. And then you will have a wide knowledge of autism and then a personal knowledge of your partner's autism. And following on from that, make a plan to help with problem areas. So for me personally, I'm really bad with change. I'm really bad with loud noises. I'm really bad with a variety. So there's some things that impact me because of my autism that will come up again and again and again, because there's always going to be change and there's always going to be loud noises, and those things are potentially going to send me into meltdown or potentially going to send me into shutdown. So it's really useful if you can sit down together when everything's good and none of these things are happening and say, okay, what are these problem areas that we are likely to encounter as a result of the autism that we can problem solve and come up with a plan now. So for example, I have meltdowns. Now in the past, before we knew that I was autistic, my husband would respond to those meltdowns by firstly trying to problem solve. Oh, what's the problem? How can I help? More input, which is obviously, if you know about meltdowns, the last thing that an autistic person with meltdowns needs. And then eventually I would go more and more and more into a really extreme meltdown, which would make him probably feel quite angry and upset, and he would respond by being angry or upset, and an argument sort of situation would have happened, and it would take us a few days to recover from that, and that would be really difficult. We have learned that the best way for him to respond to meltdowns is actually not to say very much, just to bumble around doing what he does, and eventually I kind of burn myself out ranting and whatever. And then once I'm calm enough, he offers me a hug, which actually I find useful and helpful because it makes me feel like he's not angry with me and I've not done anything wrong and I don't need to be worried. And then we can have some calm time and move on, and it doesn't have to be a big 2-day drama. It's a meltdown that takes this long and it's more like an hour out of our lives. Now, I'm not saying that's easy for Mr. Purple. I'm absolutely sure it's not. I'm not saying it's something that he achieves every single time. It's absolutely not. But he does it more of the time, which has definitely made the meltdowns easier, which actually conversely then means that I have less meltdowns because I'm not in a heightened state. So find out about those problem areas. Things like, we discovered that weekends were a problem point for me. I'm all right in the week because I have a clear routine and a clear plan and clear structure. Weekends would arrive and I would have no plan, no structure, and not know what's going on and be like really irritable and really like, oh. And Mr. Purple would be thinking, well, it's the weekend, I've been at work all week, I'd really like to have a nice week. And so we would argue and it would be difficult and it would be hard. And we realised that actually what's a bit of a struggle there is that I don't know what's going on. So now what we tend to do is on a Friday night or sometimes first thing on a Saturday morning, we make a plan for the weekend. Even if that plan is this afternoon, we're not going to do anything. Even if that plan isn't a plan, if it's a plan to do nothing, that still works as long as I have an idea of what the structure of the weekend is going to be like, and then I can fit in my own ideas around that and make the weekend that I want to enjoy, and I feel so much calmer and more relaxed. So those are just some examples of ways in which Mr. Purple and I have problem solved particular issues. So I can't tell you what those particular issues will be for you, but I can tell you that if you could write a list of the things that you and your partner keep coming up against, and then think about ways in which to work around those so that life is basically easier and better both for you and for your partner, that will be for the benefit of your relationship. Number 5 is a little bit of an embarrassing topic. I'm going to talk about intimacy. Not something that I'm overly comfortable talking about, to be honest with you, so I'm just going to keep it brief. Keep in mind sensory issues when it comes to intimacy. So I'm not going to talk about my intimate relationship with Mr. Purple because there are some things I will not talk about on the internet, and that is one of them. But I will go so far as to say that I have a really hard time with light touch. Even just doing it to myself makes me feel a little bit... So, Mr. Purple used to do some light touch related things when we were being intimate, and it would just completely kill the mood for me. And so when we found out that I was autistic, we were able to talk a little bit more about my sensory issues and how they were impacting on our physical relationship and work around those. And luckily Mr. Purple is awesome and has been willing to help and be involved in how can we have a satisfying intimate relationship which takes into account your sensory needs and takes into account my needs and takes into account our preferences, and experiment and find ways to have intimacy that is not intimacy that I'm taking part in essentially because it's normal and I'm masking and I'm trying to be normal. Instead, have intimacy that is about me actually wanting to be intimate with my husband and enjoy that intimacy. So take into account sensory issues when you're thinking about intimacy. So those are my 5 tips for neurotypical partners of autistic people, or for autistic people wanting to share with their neurotypical partners. I think this is kind of a really large topic, so I would like to make more videos on the topic of being in a marriage that is an autistic person and a neurotypical person. But I would like your suggestions. I would like to know, what is it that you are struggling with in these relationships and how can I help? What do you want me to talk about? So leave me a comment in the comment box below and I will make notes of anything that anyone has suggested for the planning of future videos. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please consider sharing it, please consider giving it a big thumbs up, and if you're enjoying the videos that I make, then please consider subscribing to my channel, because that is the best way that you can support me at this time. Thanks for watching. Bye!